Hey everybody, welcome to the Aligned Love Podcast. This is the place where I am going to help you find the one thing that you feel is missing: healthy love. I am your host, Lauren Zoeller, and in this podcast, I will share with you how to attract love, live in alignment, and elevate your deepest relationships. So buckle up, get present, tune into your body, and open up to the possibility that you truly do get to have it all. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome back to the next episode of the Aligned Love Podcast. Today I have Quentin Hafner on the show. Prior to working as a skyward success coach, Quentin spent many years in the corporate world working for private equity firms before he realized how much he enjoyed helping people create the lives and futures that they truly desired. Eventually, he made the decision to leave his corporate job and launch out to start a practice with the focus of helping high-performing people and their families solve life's challenges. He has a master's degree in psychology, and in 2018, as a way to help more men solve relationship challenges in their marriages, he published an Amazon.com #1 best-selling marriage book specifically for husbands called Black Belt Husband. And in 2024, he proudly published Go Next Level, another Amazon best-selling book in business education. We are going to talk all about masculinity and how to weave it into your relationships today on the Align Love podcast. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Quentin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're able to do this in person because originally we met on Zoom and then found out that we were both in Nashville. And I said, we need to do this in person. I'm over this Zoom thing.
I feel like we're really lucky because most people have to podcast together on Zoom, but we get to hang out. So it's so awesome.
It's like the best of both worlds.
It's really good. Yeah.
Love it. So I always start the Align Love podcast with an intention setting. And I'm going to actually have you set an intention, whatever's on your heart, for what you want people to feel as they listen to us talk today and what you want them to walk away with when we're done.
Yeah. What's on my heart right now, as you bring that up, is wanting people to walk away with a new sense of understanding of maybe what it means to be a great husband, a high value man. And if there's women listening to this, maybe a new sense of empathy for why it's hard for those guys to do that well.
Oh, I love it. And I'm very excited to talk about this because I think that there is so much happening in the relationship field and in the dating field in particular. I have women ask me all the time, how do I spot a high value man? What does it look like to know the difference between a man who's in toxic masculinity and a man who is in the space of safety within their body? So let's just start with, what does it mean to you to be a high value man? And how can a woman start to look for some of those qualities in a partner if she's out in the dating world?
Yeah, such a great question. So I just did a little YouTube thing on the 10 attributes of what I believe is to be a high value man. Okay. But I won't even go through the 10. I'll just go through the first 2. And if you're listening to this, if you just stopped at the first 2 and you looked for that, you would be like super on your way. Okay. So number 1 to me, this is just my opinion. Okay. This is just kind of my opinion based off of, my work, the guys I've met throughout life, a lot of conversations with women and what they're looking for. So I also want to caveat this real quick and just say that in God's eyes, we're priceless. Okay. And so to say like somebody's more high value than somebody else in the economy of God, it doesn't really work that way. But in the economy of the real world and in dating and meeting people and your marketability to a romantic relationship, or even in the functioning of the professional world, there are certain attributes that will put you into different domains of success than others. Okay. So just want to say that so it doesn't come across as like, if you don't carry some of these attributes, like you're worthless, because that's not what we're saying.
At all.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you gave that caveat because I think a lot of people think that when they're out in the world trying to look at, okay, can I meet this checklist? And then they just throw their hands up.
Exactly.
Because they feel like they're not worthy of being that type of person.
I think the better way to look at it is that nobody can actually meet the checklist. It's more of like, it's a spectrum. Like if you kind of were going to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you're honestly at on that? Some people are going to be 3s and some people are going to be, 8.5. No one's really going to be a 10. No one's going to be a 10. So it's just, it's a continuum, and we want to always be assessing ourselves. Like, where do we kind of like stack up?
Yeah. Love it.
So when I think of high value man, the very first character quality that I think of is self-control. And I don't think self-control gets talked about enough. I think there's a lot of other things that get talked about when it comes to, you know, what makes a great man. But self-control is, to me, the most foundational cornerstone attribute of a high value man. Because if a man doesn't have an adequate amount of self-control, he is going to be a high risk person to get into a relationship with. And so, as you can imagine, if I don't have control over my sexual impulses, I am going to be a high risk person to date, because it's very likely that I'm going to cheat on you, and I'm going to be unfaithful. Yeah. If I don't have self-control over my emotionality, my anger, my frustration, I'm going to lash out at you, and I'm going to become emotionally dangerous inside of a relationship that way. Everything that really matters in the world of men breaks down without self-control. And so if you're listening to this and you're kind of dating, and this is what I tell, like, if I'm working with a female and she's kind of out there, dating, trying to meet people, I'm always saying, look for self-control. Look for self-control. Because without enough self-control, you're putting yourself into a very risky situation that's most likely going to end really poorly. So that's the big one, is self-control. And then the second one, and these are in ranked order. The second one that I would say is self-awareness. So self-control and then self-awareness. And self-awareness is just that, it's that trait that we have where we know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, we know our thought life, we know our emotions. We're going to have a high degree of emotional intelligence. We know what we're good at, we know what we're not good at. If somebody accuses me of being X, Y, and Z, I could either say, yes, that's true, I'm not good at that. Or I could say, actually, no, I think you got me wrong, because I know myself well enough. I don't think that's me. So when people don't have a lot of self-awareness or enough self-awareness, what you see from like a relationship standpoint is just lots of blame, lots of deflection, lots of justification, minimization. It just, you get defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
And so when I think about a guy being, and then there's other ones after that, but when I think about a guy being super high value, I would just say, if you look for a guy with a great degree of self-control and a great degree of self-awareness, you are like literally ahead of the game by 90% of everybody else.
Yeah.
How does that,
I mean, that sounds amazing.
Does that kind of land on you, right?
Yeah. Well, and so that poses several questions, because I know a lot of women are going to listen to this and say, where do I find these men? Because what I get often, and I'm back in the dating world now too, and I'm a little bit more immersed in this type of work. And so I'm surrounded by these types of men often. But I know that a lot of women come to me saying, how do I get into the space where I'm meeting a man who is self-aware, who I can meet a man who does have self-control? What do you suggest, or what would you say to those women, right? What is your advice there?
Okay.
And then I think the second question, and we can circle back around to it, is if someone is listening to this and they're married and they're saying, wait a second, I noticed that my husband doesn't have these attributes. Because I always say, whatever is in our reflection, whoever we're in relationship with or whoever we're not meeting in the dating world is usually a reflection of what's happening internally. We're not taking self-accountability. We're not practicing self-control. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, if women are looking to meet somebody that way, and also if they're married to someone who isn't exuding these qualities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great questions. Okay. So we'll start with the single people first.
Okay.
So I think that most people that are single get the dating process so backwards.
Tell me more.
Okay. And so what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a perfect example of a personal friend of mine. Okay. His name's Joe, and I hope he listens to this podcast. I'm going to share it with him. Okay.
We'll find you, Joe.
Yeah.
We'll send it to you.
Okay. So Joe, he lives in California. he's always talking to me about wanting to meet a great woman, a great gal. He's like, where do I find, he's from Orange County, California. Apparently there's no great women in Orange County, California. He can't meet any. And so I say, well, tell me about your dating life. What does it look like for you? And so Joe drives a neon green Lamborghini. Okay. And he goes to the most bougie and affluent places in Orange County, and he valets his green Lamborghini. And all the women that are drawn to him look like porn stars.
Yeah.
Okay. And no, I'm not judging anything. I'm just like, I want to paint a picture of why it's not working for Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he meets these women, and apparently it turns out that after dating a few of them for a couple months, they're just not really great women after all. And then he's like, how do I find a great woman? Okay. So Joe is dating in a really common way, but in a really ineffective way. Okay. Because what he's doing, he is trying to meet somebody typically based. This is what most men do. Most men are pursuing women that they find very attractive, very funny, very smart. Maybe they make good money. And none of those attributes, according to research, have any bearing on the success of a relationship. Mm. And women do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so women are dating for handsome, make money, smart, funny, tall, dark, whatever that, the tall, dark, and handsome. And then they find themselves in relationships that maybe started very, passionately or excitingly, and then it doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. Because none of those things that we have kind of been taught to look for in a potential partner are sustainable qualities for the success of a relationship.
Right. And
so from a single person's standpoint, it's like if we want to be, if our end goal, if like our long-term vision is really to be successful in a relationship, we have to totally like flip it upside down, like how we're going to go about dating.
Yeah.
And we have to date based off of, looking for character quality, looking for values, looking for personality traits, looking for temperament. And the only way to do that is to, from date one, think about it as an interview, and you're not there to have fun. You're there to ask really hard questions.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because there are so many people that say, don't look at the first date as an interview. But when you're dating with intention, which is what you're speaking about, you have to, because that is what you're committed to if you want something long-term.
Exactly. And then people get frustrated. They're like, oh my gosh, I've met like 5 guys in the last year and like none of them worked out. And I'm like, well, tell me what the first couple of weeks look like when you meet somebody. And it's like, oh, it was just like a whirlwind and we had so much fun. And in week 2, we went to Miami together. And it's like, but then this person didn't really represent or embody the traits that are really most important to you. And then most, like, according to research, that the traits that are going to be successful in a long-term relationship. Right. So, if someone's even online dating, I'll tell people, like, put it in their profile that they are the kind of person that's going to ask hard questions. Mm-hmm. And if somebody is like, doesn't want to play that game, then that's great, because you're just going to filter people out that probably you're not going to want to date anyway.
Right.
So, going on date 1, date 2, date 3, and like thinking of yourself as assessing what kind of person is this really? But the reason that's hard for people is because emotion kicks in, we get excited and we're like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And then all of our, logical and rational side of our brain that was going to help us make a great decision gets totally overcome by the excitement. This guy's so cute. Oh my gosh, he's so funny. And then, like, fast forward 6 months down the road, it didn't work out. And then we're back to square one.
Right.
So it's like a very unromantic way to date. And I totally understand that. It's like not fun. It's not exciting, but it's like really just, you have to kind of ask yourself what really is most important. I mean, if you want if you want to kind of go out into the world and do the, be romantic and have the big flame that's going to fizzle out, that's fine. Okay. Because sometimes in life we do that and there's a season for that. But if you want to really think about meeting somebody that's high value, like if you want to meet the high value man, you have to just approach dating in kind of an upside down way that very few people do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think that dating apps have, in a lot of ways, cursed us because there's so many women, at least women that I work with, who will set their filters so short. Like he has to make this amount of money and he has to be this height. And they're not even giving certain men a chance that could potentially be really wonderful, high value men because they don't meet that checklist that you were talking about earlier, which I think in essence is very detrimental to women and men in the dating world right now.
Yeah, I think it's like when you have so much choice, it doesn't necessarily make your life easier.
Yeah.
It makes it harder in a lot of ways too, because it's like you could choose amongst millions of people and then, so I was just going to say this too, like for the person that, if I was going to, and this is going to be more your forte, but if you were going to say, well, what are the top 10 attributes to be a high value woman? Because high value men are going to be looking for high value women.
Right.
And it's like, well, how do I attract one of these guys? How do I find one of these great guys? Well, it's like, you become that kind of a woman.
Exactly.
Like you can't like fours, this is the way the world works, take it up with God, but fours don't match up with eights.
Yep.
And we know that even just from like emotional health standpoint, like people with the same level or degree of emotional health always kind of get connected to each other's. And it's the same thing with like the marketplace of dating. So it's like, if you really want to meet that 8, the guy with self-control, the guy that's self-aware, the guy that's been in therapy, he's done work on himself, you have to become that person.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I preach all the time.
That's your thing. Okay.
Yeah. And I love it so much. Yeah. Okay. So we have a stance now on what women need to do if they're single and they're out in the dating world and they're looking for a high value man. What advice do you give to women who are in a relationship or married and they notice, wow, I don't really know if my husband has these attributes, or I don't know if the man that I'm dating long-term has these attributes? What happens next?
Such a good question. So the way I would respond to that is there's a couple ways to look at it. And I think there's a couple ways to look at it. So I think first of all, we have to, the very first thing is we have to look inward. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we have to ask ourselves some really hard questions. Like, why do I want this? Mm-hmm. Why is this really important to me? Is it really not there to the degree that I think it's not there, or is it not there because I feel frustrated about something else? So what I like to encourage people to do is say, okay, like if I'm feeling frustrated with something about my partner, before I go to them and say, hey, this thing isn't really working for me, and like I'm going to bring something up about you, I'm going to do a ton of heavy lifting about me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask hard questions like, why does this really even matter to me? And why am I frustrated about this? Because I'm sure I could go find a million people walking the planet that wouldn't be frustrated about that. So what is it about me? And I'm going to spend a lot of time really working that out. And I think where a lot of people go wrong in relationships is they don't do that work. They don't really discover what it is about them that's triggering something about the other person, and they just immediately go to the other person. Right. And they say, well, you know what? I don't think you're very self-aware. Mm. And I think you need to go to therapy, and I'm getting really frustrated in this relationship. And then it like turns into this like power struggle. There's like nagging, and then there's like a rebellion, and the whole relationship
resentment. Exactly. And then the seed just gets planted, and then it's just over.
It starts to break down.
Yeah.
It starts to break down. So looking inward first about what it is, why is this important to us? And then if we are going to go to our partner and we're going to basically, make a complaint, And this is really important for women listening who want to address something with their male partner. It's like men are so prone to shame that if you criticize men, you will never, not in a million years, will you get the response that you're hoping for or looking for. You're never going to, and if you can find that guy, I want to meet him and interview him. But like, if you go to some guy and you're like, hey, like, you know, I'm tired of this, you know, whatever, and you need to change. And if a guy raises his hand and says, oh, you know what, you're right, I am going to change, I literally want to meet that guy. I've never met that guy. Okay. Because men are so prone to shame, they will typically shut down and become resistant to whatever your complaint was in a passive aggressive way.
Right.
Sometimes they'll be aggressive, but more likely they're going to be passive aggressive and kind of avoid whatever complaint you have. And so they're going to create their own little mutiny in the relationship just by avoiding the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if women need to address something in a relationship, it's so important that women understand what shame is and what shame is like and what shame feels like and how most men are going to react to shame, because there is a way to approach men and talk about stuff that's not working that's gonna be your best chance at not activating shame in men. And I'm not gonna like go into the whole process of doing that right now, but basically it's very important to not criticize. Okay. And it's very important to approach men in a complimentary way and talk about why it really matters to you more and not so much about why they need to change and what's wrong with them. Yeah. It's like it's a subtle shift. It is an art, but it is a giant fork in the road. One is going to be more likely to get men to be responsive to whatever it is that you're looking for. And one is going to get them to say basically like, fuck you, I'm not interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and I would love to have you on again to talk about what that would look like, because I know a lot of people are probably, their ears are perking up.
We kind of left them hanging with that.
We left them hanging with that one. So they're going to have to follow you and they're going to, hopefully you'll post it somewhere about how they can start to, you know, look at dealing with shame, because shame is, I always say that shame, it's the stickiest emotion that we have, because it literally sticks to everything. And especially when we're working with that dynamic inside of a relationship, it is something that can lead to resentment so quickly if it's not handled in a lot of ways with baby gloves, because a lot of what you're touching into with men and women too, when we're dealing with shame, is stuff that's so deep. It's from childhood and it starts to make its way into the relationship. And then it just gets really difficult to try to navigate if you're not handling it in the right way. So in the next episode of the Align Love podcast with Quentin Hafner, you're going to talk about shame. We'll do an episode on shame. But I ask this question on every single episode of the Align Love podcast, and I'm curious to know your answer to. What does it mean to you to be in an aligned relationship? And it can be a relationship to your spouse, to yourself, to a friend. What does alignment in a relationship mean to you?
So I'm going to give I'm not going to be a super long answer, but somebody posted on it. It's a guy I follow who's like in the manosphere space on Instagram yesterday. And he posted something about men should never share their emotions with their partners because it's a sign of weakness. And I responded to him, and it's answering your question. So for me and my relationship with my wife, alignment with us is sharing our emotions. We are constantly sharing our emotions with each other. My wife, not for 1 second, has ever thought of me as a weak man. She knows me too well to know that I'm not that. And the emotion that we share with each other is the bonding agent that helps us create intimacy and connection with each other. And our relationship wouldn't be what it is without the sharing of that emotion. And so for her and I, that's alignment for us, is really kind of like diving into deep waters from an emotional standpoint and connecting deeply emotionally. And the cool thing is I've been married for 15 years, and that connection just gets deeper and deeper and deeper the more time that goes on, that we're able to really connect on an emotional level in a really deep way.
I love it. Yeah. I love that so much. It's a beautiful answer. And I'm so glad that you told that guy that he was maybe not wrong, because I don't like to say that anybody is right or wrong, but that he can gain some curiosity around what it means to actually share vulnerably inside of a partnership. Because I agree, it is the glue that brings you deeper.
Yeah, I actually had a ton of empathy for him. I just thought that, I didn't say this to him, but my hunch is that he's never been in a relationship with a woman that's made that safe.
Yeah.
And so that's his kind of like reaction to the world from that standpoint, which is such a bummer. I just hope that he finds something different in that regard.
I agree. Well, Quentin, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we end today, would love for you to just take a moment to plug yourself, let people know where they can find you, what you're up to next. I know that you have 2 best-selling books on Amazon. I think it's Black Belt Husbands and what was this?
Go Next Level.
Go Next Level. That's right. I just talked about it in the intro. So people can go check those out. But where can people find you?
Easiest way is probably Instagram. Quentin Hafner is my Instagram thing. Or you could go to quentinhafner.com is my website. I brought you a copy of both books. So
perfect. Yay. So excited. Quentin, thank you so much. And I'm going to have you on again soon so we can talk about shame.
I love it. I love it. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. That wraps up today's episode of the Aligned Love podcast. One thing that would really help me and the other new potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment wherever you tune in and listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on Instagram at Lauren Zoeller, and please share this podcast with anyone who you think may enjoy it. Until next episode, remember, every transformation begins with one moment of awareness, and I hope today has been yours. I'll see you next time.